to
Yeah.
be moving on to something new and refreshing and nearing the finish line. So I understand that. Is it H-159, Representative Kimball?
Yes, it is. Yes, H-159.
H-159 is sort of an omnibus bill, economic development bill, commerce bill. So this is our first pass, and I thought instead of having David Hall walk us through it, it might be best to hear it from a legislator, the perspective generally of what's going on. And, we'll be dealing with this certainly next week as well. So Representative Kimball, welcome.
Thank you, Senator. For the record, Representative Charlie Kimball from Woodstock and a member of the Vice Chair of the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee. So I'll present to you what is the House passed version of H-159 and what is in it. There are a lot of different elements, and I can go into as much detail or not as you'd like. We can cover some of them, and you can just let me know if you want to dig down further.
Okay, I think sort of a medium level of detail at this point will probably have you back.
Okay.
Get the gist of what's in there. Thank you.
There are a lot of different elements to this economic development bill that at one point don't seem like they're related, but they are. And so as we go through, it's many different areas of economic development. So in the first section is really about the budget for tourism and marketing. We were approached by the Department of Tourism Marketing for a couple of different asks. One was to create an economic development marketing fund, and we really came back with, we recognize the point where we are, that we need to provide monies to get the tourism and hospitality industry positioned to come out of the pandemic in a stronger position, as Vermont's heavily reliant on the tourism sector. So as we were even looking at it, that Vermont is third in the country when it comes to the percent of GDP from the state as the portion that tourism comprises. And also it's 10th in terms of the share of jobs. It comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So we supported the request, but made it a one-time monies allocation of $1 million. That was increased in our appropriations committee to $2.5 million. They're recognizing the moment we're in and the importance of bringing the tourism industry back online when it's safe to open. If you remember last year, we allocated through a variety of different programs $6.5 million for a variety of consumer stimulus packages and also marketing dollars. We got a complete breakdown from the department as to how those monies were spent, when they were spent, how they were spent. And they did a really good job of, given the conditions they had to operate in, and telling people, don't come now, come later. And so now it's a matter of when we reopen, it's come now. So that's the $2.5 million. It's in the bill for tourism marketing.
How much did the governor propose for tourism marketing?
The governor proposed two different things. One was a consumer stimulus package that was kind of a renewal of the vouchers that we had heard from before, and as well as the establishment of a tourism fund. That tourism fund was going to be a creation of, well, let me back up. It's been an idea that's rolled around a few different times in creating a permanent fund for tourism to be funded from some other source other than general fund money. This latest iteration was to take the excess of rooms and meals tax that was generated over and above what was anticipated from the revenue projections and put that into a tourism fund that would be used that way. And so that's what the agency recommended. That's what the governor recommended. And that was 69% of any rooms and meals tax that exceeded the expectations. And that takes into account the amount that's already diverted towards the education fund and also clean water projects. So that's the other 31% of that. We did not feel in our committee that that was wise to create a separate fund like that. you may feel differently, but it was our opinion at the time that we didn't want to create a separate fund, and really kind of binds the hands of the legislature in terms of what it can do with the money.
And it doesn't seem like there's any consumer stimulus proposal, at least in this section. Is there one later on?
There is not. And the House has not fully embraced the consumer stimulus approach. The department still likes it. The consumer stimulus last year took two different forms. One was that $500,000 that was allocated towards those vouchers that were redeemable, and you sign up for them. 425 of that was the actual value. 75 was the cost of setting it up and administering it. And the other package was regional marketing dollars that were put towards a variety of regional marketing agencies, whether it's chambers of commerce or different organizations that then ran local promotions. And those local promotions could have been a gift card or a passport to different stores or different businesses within their membership, and you would get value by visiting those. So the department can certainly speak to their advocacy for those. We did not share the same value to it.
Okay, that's good.
So that's the first one.
So sorry, just before you move on, Charlie, $1 million one time, you supported the governor's $1 million one-time spend, and the $2.5 million in general fund.
So we supported the full $2.5 million allocation. That is the House position. So what came in was a couple of different asks from the administration. What came out of the House is really a $2.5 million one-time spend.
So that's the total. Sorry, I thought I heard you mention $1 million at one time. Okay.
And just to get a frame of reference, Representative Kimball, you did it as one time. Is it fair to say that you saw a special need coming out of COVID, or are you just cautious in terms of making it base funding at this point, or what's your thinking on that?
We thought that there was a compelling reason because of COVID, and have put some things in the bill to point to the fact that the tourism industry has been extraordinarily hit. We took significant testimony on this, and think there was a moment that we really need to step in and help those industries recover. In terms of adding to the base, we did not take a position on that. Certainly the industry would like to see us add more money to the base funding, and that could be warranted, but we didn't feel at this point in time we were going to try to create that. Certainly the mechanism that had been proposed by creating that fund was not something that we embraced.
And the base funding is in the House passed budget at 300,000. Is that correct?
No, I believe it's $3.1 million in terms of the funding for Department of Tourism and Marketing. So that includes both operating expenses and also their hard dollar costs of advertising that they do. Marketing, I shouldn't say advertise, but marketing, which is a variety of activities, whether it's social media or paid advertising or even PR efforts.
For some reason, $300,000 sticks in my mind, and there was an effort last year, a couple of years ago, to raise that to 500,000 or $1 million. Maybe that's a subset of their overall budget. Does that ring a bell with you?
It doesn't, but it doesn't mean it's not true.
Okay, we'll find out. Thank you.
Yep. And that the Appropriations Committee, when it came through, dedicated these funds as ARPA money, not general fund money.
The right.
2.5 million.
2.5.
Yeah.
Money. Okay.
Yeah.
May I just ask you a question on the ARPA money?
Sure.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So Charlie, what gave you a degree of comfort that ARPA money would be, that the guidance would come down supporting that? Because we have not, the House on the whole, I would say, has been moving ahead, allocating and appropriating ARPA money, when I don't think we have yet a handle on understanding what funnel it's going through, what the guidance is that curtails, directs it or curtails it, or even identifies where it can be spent. what gave you the confidence you could do that? I'm just curious. Or did Approps do that? You didn't take testimony?
Yeah, appropriations did that, and so they can speak more to it. But from my understanding is that based on the advice of the Joint Fiscal Office and the interpretation of the ARPA funds guidance as it exists currently, is that it can be used in this way. So it's there's a general catch-all. If it's related to COVID, it can be for businesses and other activities and other entities in the recovery from COVID. So it's I think it is the JFO interpretation that we're relying heavily on in order to make that allocation.
Thanks.
Following up on that, I could already see it playing out similar to last year, where we're going to be, moving money and changing money based upon guidelines. One example, a crazy example, is I know there's a separate set aside for restaurants. It may be
Right.
possible within that line item to do restaurant advertising, or Vermont being a culinary capital of the world, and moving money back and forth to maximize the funds and the need. And we'll probably wind up going home when all of that's at its peak.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's our challenge. If guidance is only coming out early May, you're absolutely right. It's a challenge.
Yeah, the same is true for the shuttered venues grants, trying to figure out where that money is and the details around that. And even though they claim to be open, I think there's still a lot in the details that need to be worked out.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to section 2 now.
Sure. Technology-based economic development is the next section. And you may recall that this was a proposal that was in the legislature from the administration in a previous year. Around technology-based economic development. So this gets into some of the weeds around how the money can be used. So the request was for $1 million. And when we received a request originally, it was to really go just to the University of Vermont, working in partnership with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development to help businesses prepare for and apply for SBIR and STTR grants. And if you recall the description, that is Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer grants that are federal grants, very competitive, hard to get, and both phase 1 and phase 2 grants. So we put some meat around the bones because it wasn't clear exactly what the money would be used for. And in that process, got into some pretty detailed discussions about how the Agency of Commerce would use this money versus how the University of Vermont would use the money. In the end, the House passed the bill and recommending that the $1 million flow through the University of Vermont to provide support to entities throughout the state to first get technical assistance. And that's how we look at $200,000 to provide technical assistance to businesses that are looking to pursue those grants. And then we're looking at a matching grant program, which is a 50% matching grant, $400,000 in there to really provide these companies with the ability to launch after they get the grant from SBIR, to also match that with some state dollars to really get the project to a feasibility part. And then the third is part of this is looking at $200,000 so those businesses can purchase research or to engage in those research activities that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to. And some of that's going to be directly with the university. Some of it may be with other institutions. So it could be MIT has the right information or the right research and they have to go there. So UVM already participates with a number of regional organizations in terms of research. They participate with Dartmouth, for instance, where somebody may have the right set of laboratory equipment or stuff that they just don't have. So that is could be used to pay for that. And then the other part is looking at the UVM Office of Engagement. And that office is already set up. This is the one door to open it to the university, as a way for businesses to really contact the university and provide and obtain services, their vast resources, whether it's researchers, whether it's studies that have been done, that kind of stuff. So that's $200,000. And then the House appropriations added to that monies to support the UVM Office of Engagement activities. And that's the $2 million you see there in the bill. So that is in support of their activities. And we also have a reporting requirement. We want to know what they're doing. How have you done? How many applicants have you talked to? Is when we look back at the history of SBIR funds, this ties into what we'll see a little later on with the Vermont Center for Emerging Technologies. Vermont is already participating a lot. Since 1984, Vermont-based companies have received $162 million in SBIR grants. And STTR grants, it is another, it's another 12 million. But a lot of those companies are already existing companies, ones that you would know by name, some that you may never have heard about. But that's not who we're trying to help in this. Who we're trying to help is those companies that are looking to commercialize research and the first-time applicants and having them get help. So we're really talking about building this entrepreneurial network and support for converting that research into commercialization. So you may think of the Research Triangle down in North Carolina as being this hotbed for research-based companies. And that's what we're really trying to encourage here in this section of the bill.
So I assume you had UVM in?
We did. We had both separate conversations with UVM outside. We talked to UVM and the representatives inside. We talked to the agency. We've had subsequent conversations with the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBDC, because they had a program to assist with SBIR grant applicants that's been dormant for a while. They're standing it back up. So UVM has come to the table and said, we can cover the state with this program. And the onus is on them to prove that they can and within this and to prove that they can. They do have the largest access to research in the state as a true research university. It doesn't mean, I mean, there's also folks at St. Michael's College and there's folks at the state college system that also have participated in SBIR grants, both 1 and 2. So it's not that it's exclusive to UVM, but they have to make sure that they're covering the entire state and working with the other organizations. So within state governments, we also have the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, which helps companies obtain grants from different government organizations and entities, but also supports their efforts to obtain SBIR funds. So there's a lot of people in this pot. And with this bill, we're enabling UVM to take the lead in it.
And to coordinate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that's a big piece of coordination.
Senator Rahm.
Well, I just want to say on the record, because it wouldn't show up in my original conflict of interest filing or, whatever we do for ethical purposes in the beginning of session. I just joined the board of the UVM Office of Engagement this month. So I have not been to my first meeting. I have not heard enough about the plans to do this statewide, but I did want to say on the record, I've just joined their board specifically so that they can actually live into their statewide mandate and really support young people, particularly across the state. I have seen the efforts of their research already. I was also part of one of their focus groups before joining the board. And they are, doing work that we really don't have the liberty or luxury of doing in state government right now because we're so busy managing crises. But I just wanted to say that on the record that we all have obviously many conflicts, but I'll be adding that somehow to my conflict.
That's great.
So,
I mean, may I just ask, Charlie, we have resources around the state that we have built, and they may not be adequately staffed, but are they to coordinate also with our regional development corps and with our, you mentioned the state colleges, which was originally one of my questions, because UVM isn't the sole research center, as you already noted. So is there charge to coordinate with the RDCs as well and the state colleges?
There is, and that's where you won't find uniformity among the different folks that are involved with economic development throughout the state, because there's overlap. There's clear overlap as to who does what between the regional development corporations, the Agency of Commerce Community Development. So it's there is, and the Small Business Development Center. You know, who is talking to these people? These people meaning individuals interested in pursuing a technology-based business. So there's a lot of overlap. The Vermont Center for Emerging Technologies is another player in this. I mean, there's various groups, the Vermont Technology Council. So it really gets to be a very deep pool of players, but the university in this will need to coordinate with those different people. I would say that there's still, it is a trial in some ways to prove that they can do this and cover the entire state.
Thanks.
So Senator Rahm, your statement on the Vermont Office of Engagement is good to know, and it leads me to my very basic question. I'm not familiar with the Vermont Office of Engagement, so why don't you enlighten us a little bit about what it does?
So, Charlie, do you want to
I
start?
can take a stab and then you can fill it in. How's that sound?
That sounds
You can
good.
correct me where I'm wrong.
Whatever, yep.
This is really an initiative of President Garamella to embrace the land grant mission of the University of Vermont, which is basically to ensure that people throughout the state, the citizens of the state, receive an education, college level of education, loosely interpreted. So they have an obligation to provide the services to the entire state and not just a particular geographic corner. And then the concept is built on his experience at Purdue University, where he had created an office of engagement that was really that first phone call or first door to open for people looking for assistance from the university, and to provide those resources of the university to those that are looking for it. And it could be individuals, it could be businesses, but in this particular way, it is a way to bring the research capabilities of the university to the businesses throughout the state, or those looking to coordinate the research, coordinate their efforts inside the state. So that's kind of the premise. It does a couple of things. It brings the resource of the university to different people. It also helps commercialize the research that they're doing. And that is for the businesses that want to do that on their own without any benefit coming back to the university, or providing another stream of revenue to the university for monetizing the research they have done and completed. So it's really those three things that they're really trying to do, to be more present and fulfill their land grant mission, to provide a pathway for commercialization of the research, and also to provide a revenue stream for the research that they've done.
What I would add, I mean, essentially it's one way to look at it is UVM extension, but for more than agriculture. You know, it's a presence around the state to help with technical assistance and, you know, all of the various expertise areas that the university has. And areas of expertise actually go beyond research. I mean, you know, they have a large diversity and equity unit. They have a large affirmative action office. You know, they have functions that other institutions in the state need to develop as well. And so talking about how to offer that support and monetize that as well. And, you know, I would also just add, this is supposed to be a hub statewide for internships and the experiences of young people in accessing, you know, greater professional development opportunities, helping institutions stand up internship and workshop programs or co-ops for engineering students and others. So That's one of the other reasons that I joined as well, is because state government has tried to be that hub for internships and connecting young people to greater economic opportunity. We didn't do a great job of that, so that is going to be a future function, I believe, of this institution, this office.
So we don't need to get into it now, but you might want to, I don't know, Representative Kill, you want to say a few words? Without getting too much into the weeds, it really strikes me that subsection 4 on page 3 is a little bit unusual to have 20% of the funding being used for administrative costs, when a lot of the administrative costs can be built into the first 3 items in and of themselves. It doesn't seem to be heavy administration, but I'm sure we'll have some debate around that appropriate level for admin costs.
You're absolutely right.
Okay, let's move on to, I guess it would be subsection.
Top of page 4, the post-secondary CTE program system, section 3.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, this may look familiar to you. It was in a bill H919, I believe, in the 2018 session. So this is a gap. This is where the Select Committee on the Future of Public Higher Education, looking at Vermont State Colleges, was looking at the total workforce development system as part of their charge. How do the state colleges fit into that workforce development system? And by their own admission, they said, we don't have time, especially the NCHEM report, to look at the role that the adult education and CTE centers for adults plays in that workforce development arena. So this is a study that we had requested in legislation. It was not completed. We think it is important. The Department of Labor had worked with the Agency of Education in getting it to the point of sending out an RFP, had selected a contractor. So they were laid off the mark in getting that work done, but that was in 2019 where the RFP was let out, the contractor was selected, and then we had COVID hit in 2020. The monies that we had allocated to this then were reverted back into the budget as other things took priority because of COVID-19 and the response to the pandemic. So the study never got done. And we think it's important that we need to do this. And instead of just trying to ram something through saying, no, this is how we're going to reorganize adult education at the career and technical education centers, we need the study. So we're coming back to this and saying, we want the study to be done. And if you recall, this is when we had sitting at our table 3 years ago, Joyce Judy from the Community College of Vermont and Pat Moulton from the Vermont Technical College, as well as members of the Career and Technical Education Network, and the Agency of Education and the Department of Labor. We were all working together to try to figure out how are we going to fix this issue and better utilize our CTEs and better provide more workforce development. So that's what this study calls for, and $75,000 to fund the study.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Section 5.
The Better Places program. No, is that it? No.
Section 4 is, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Appropriation is the.
Northern Borders.
Okay, you did that. Okay, section 5.
Yeah, so Northern Borders Regional Commission. This shouldn't take any time to explain at all.
Oh, Charlie, this looks familiar.
Yes, it does. So this had been proposed in legislation before as well. So as you know, the Northern Borders Regional Commission is a creature of, or a creation of the Congress, and it declares a district of those counties and actually the entire state of Vermont that fall into the district of the Northern Borders. and is patterned after the Appalachian Commission that provides funding for distressed communities within its geographic area. So Northern Borders currently operates and is divvying out money to worthy projects throughout their states. It's the governor of Vermont sits on the board. The issue that we're trying to address here is they are not in a position, they don't have authority anywhere to purchase health insurance for the members of their organization. And there are 12 members that work, or 12 people, individuals that worked for the Northern Borders Regional Commission. So this section of the bill is to add them to the list of organizations that can purchase group health insurance plans from the state of Vermont pool, and at no cost to the state. This is totally passed through to them. So they pay for every dollar of this. There's no liability that's created for the state. They're not considered to be part of any kind of retirement pool or anything else. So it's really adding them to the list. So the other people on the list you'll see is the Vermont State Employees Credit Union, the Vermont Historical Society, the Vermont State Employees Association, Vermont Council on the Arts. And we took out the Vermont Film Corporation because they simply don't exist anymore.
Right. And added Northern Border Regional Commission. That's great. Thank you for
Yep.
doing that and that follow through. That's great.
So there's no opposition at all from any quarters on this section, right?
No, we even checked with Beth Fastigi in the administration, who is the head of the Human Resources Division. I may get her title wrong, but I believe she's the Commissioner of Human Resources. And she said this is fine with them and does not pose any extra cost or any liability to the state.
Oh, welcome back, Randy.
Thank you.
They found the internet up in Northern Vermont.
Actually, it was my VPN.
Oh, ouch. Okay.
Okay, section 6, Better Places Program.
So the Better Places program, that will take a little bit to go through. As you know, this had been proposed last session by the Department of Housing and Community Development. This is a very creative program to really embrace the new community-based efforts to transform spaces into new public spaces. And it provides a matching program. So we took extensive testimony from both the department, but also communities from artist groups that would be participating and how they might avail themselves. Here's the issue that generally happens. There might be someone with a good idea to create, to transform a public space. You might want to create a pocket park. You might want to do some kind of new project in your community. And it's going to cost X amount of dollars. And oftentimes the people that have the idea do not have the expertise in order to raise the money and actually get it done. And they're usually under-resourced. So there's a very high failure rate of a lot of these different efforts because they lack some of the organizational needs. There's also a lot of communities that do not have the support in order to get the community together to do it. So this program steps in to help those organizations and individuals get the support they need to raise the money, and provides a funding vehicle and a crowd granting platform to raise money, and also provides a matching fund so that they can then use the state resources. In this case, we're looking at $5 million from the state to fund that particular project. There are many successful examples that exist around the state. The one that's often brought up is what Bethel had done with their Better Bethel program, where they had a community group come together and say, we want to, for a short period of time, transform our downtown area. Let's put some, get people to involve in an art project. They transformed a bleak cement wall into a mural with some great fish on the side of it. That sounds kind of innocuous, but they look great and gets people around participating in the activity. They had many people come into downtown. They took a survey with about 140 or 150 people participate in the survey. And they had many people actually attend the events that were created from that. The result of that is not only did they have a group of people come together and create a nucleus of momentum inside of the community for new spirit, new definition, new direction. But also what happened is a lot of the vacant buildings became remodeled and filled with commercial tenants and also residential tenants. So it is a way for communities to kind of revive themselves with their own work, assisted by the state. So that's what Better Places is. I'm sure the agency can do a better job of describing what that looks like. But one of the things that is probably a best example that they shared with us is looking at how Church Street Marketplace was created so many years ago in Burlington. It was first, it was the 1970s. It was a week-long festival in which they had closed the street and had vendors come out into the street and as an experiment. And 50,000 people came through to participate in that. So they said, maybe we have something here. So they did it a second time, and that led to the creation of the pedestrian mall on Church Street. So it certainly gives rise to a transformational change in communities. So that's a really good example.
Mr. Chair, can I hop in here for a sec?
Absolutely.
So one of the things, Charlie, thanks so much for joining us this morning. One of the things that I've been thinking about in relationship to this program is how we're at this moment right now as we are looking ahead to come out of, hopefully, out of the pandemic, and thinking about my downtown in Brattleboro, thinking about Bellows Falls right up the road, thinking about when I am driving into Montpelier every day and how they feel a little like ghost towns right now. And I think that's a scary place for residents. That's a scary place for all those merchants. And so I feel like one opportunity I see in this program is an ability for a community to start to reinvent itself coming out of this emergency, because we're going to need to be thinking really in these concentrated groups within communities to figure out where we go from here. So I'm really intrigued by it. I'm glad that you were able to come and speak to this morning.
And Mr. Chair, if I may tag on, I think our committees, Charlie's and ours, our partner in the House, we put a lot of, we have so few tools to help in community redevelopment and in investments in our downtown and village centers. In many of the tools that we look at in our TIFs, our downtown tax credits, we are empowering business and infrastructure. This empowers people, and this empowers transformational change through the people and the energy of the people. And yes, there are physical manifestations of that, but really this is empowering the people and the people's energy to transform. So I view this as another tool for our toolbox.
So just to, I guess, to play devil's advocate here, I want to ask Charlie, did the committee at all look at other sources of existing funds for programs like this? We get warnings from our appropriations committee all the time to be careful about starting new programs with one-time money that could lead to ongoing base funding. And I think this is an example of that here. I assume that this is one-time funding at this point, but I also assume that people will be back next year asking for similar amounts of money. And I think of things like the Council of the Arts, CBDG money, downtown development grants, and I'm not necessarily opposed to the concept here, but to set up another silo and funding source, I think, let's put it this way, I want to look into that further, and I'm wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, there are some other projects. The project that comes to the Building and General Services, for instance, that does provide some funding for projects in 4 different areas. There are some limitations to those funds as to what you can do with them. And so this provides a much more general thing. So are we creating a long-term need for money? First, the $5 million that we're talking about here is a substantial amount of money. It's going to last a number of years, not just 12 months. We believe that's true. The grants are limited to $50,000 at the most. That's $5,000 to $50,000. The agency plans on coming out with a grant program of $5,000 to $20,000. So it's going to take some time to actually go through the funds. The second thing that in looking at all the different resources of funds, this is different. This is much different because it involves that crowdfunding element. And it requires a participation of people in the community. So that doesn't answer your question about is the agency going to come back in 2 or 3 years and ask for another chunk of money? That could happen realistically. It's not a revolving loan program. This is a grant program. So the monies, once they're gone, are not coming back. So that there is that part of it as well. But it also is an injection of funds into these communities, as Senator Bannon was saying, at a time when they really need it. The other thing is that the way that's structured is that we have a match in here of 25% match, which is not like, it's not a one-to-one match that if you have a $10,000 project that you have to raise $2,500 and the state chips in $2,500. No, it's actually with a 25% match, that becomes a 3-to-1 match. So that if you raise $2,500, then the grant is calculated at being $7,500. That's kind of how the math works in that sense. And so that is a $10,000 total project. So it really leverages that. It also, we heard from Preservation Trust, we heard from AARP, ironically, who's doing a lot of work in different communities, and a lot of different, Vermont Community Foundation. A lot of funders for these types of projects are looking for a coordinating effort like this, so they can then choose the ones they can participate and easily participate by saying, we pledge our money to this particular project. This shows community buy-in, it shows state buy-in. So it's a lot of things that are happening at the same time that move that project to the finish line. The other thing that we found is that we looked at other states that have done similar things, and Michigan has a very active program with this. Their success rate for any projects that start with a community grant making approach is 97%. And that's incredible to have that kind of success rate. And part of that is because of the amount of support that's wrapped around the people that are coming forth with these projects. Support in the form of technical assistance. How do we put together a fundraising plan? How do we actually get people involved in it? And doing all the things that you would ordinarily do as an organization, you're training those people in the community to participate in those ways, not only for that project, but going forward.
So the match rate in your bill is 25% local match to 75% from the state?
Yeah, and that will then, they've got the ability to change that to a 50-50. And the reason for that is that if funds start to run tight, then the agency wants the ability to say, okay, we've got that big chunk of money out the door, but we really want to keep going for a while, so we might change it so there's a smaller match. Yes.
Okay.
I saw Senator Rahm's hand.
I'm sorry, Senator Rahm, please.
So I talked to Chris Cochran about this last night as a newer senator. I have no problem with the program, but I'm just saying this to people in a higher station in the Senate than me. I just worry about programs where you have to have a lot of committed professional staff in the community to help make this happen. And I think it speaks to the need for a state planning office or some state level technical planning assistance offering that helps equalize the burden of who can sort of access this. I mean, to Senator Ballin's point, she's passing communities that feel like they need this. And those aren't always the communities that get the money, because, you know, the communities with more professional staff and more of a commitment to this kind of work already are the ones who get the money. And that becomes very unequal around the state in terms of who accesses these dollars and how it benefits all of our communities, and particularly our distressed communities. And we need a state planning office. That's what I'm going to say.
Well, aside, not about whether or not there's a good reason for a state planning office, but this program actually addresses a lot of what you just brought up, because you're right, the towns that have either a really good volunteer staff or a paid professional are usually the first at the table for grants and can get them. But those communities that do not have that often are left on the sideline. And this crowd granting approach does work in smaller communities. And we spent a long time talking about whether or not this disadvantaged communities could take advantage of this. You know, what's the requirement of the match? I mean, can we remove that? And we thought it was really important, based on the testimony that we heard, to leave that in there as a requirement. And that even though in the poorest communities, it may be difficult to come up with a match, those communities have, in practice, been able to make the match. So the pilot project that was run by the Vermont Community Foundation in the fall, they decided to go ahead with this concept and had $90,000 dedicated to it. They had over 60 communities apply, and over $1 million in requests come in for this particular pilot program. So they showed that it works in that sense. They just announced, I think a few weeks ago, as to who the recipients of those grants were. And in each case, the match was met. No, I'm sorry. There was no requirement for a match in those in that particular rollout. But in most cases, there was a match that was already made by people in the community because they believed in the project.
So if I could, Representative Kimball, you cited a study or a program in another state which looked at success rate. And I'm just wondering, what was the metric for success? Was it just completion of the project? Was it, I'm just curious what the criteria was. I'm not doubting, you know, I'm just wondering, how do you go about measuring success in this particular situation?
I would say completion of the project. I mean, we didn't talk long-term about what is the long-term impact on that community, but it is a good driver. Yeah.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I think that takes us to, no, where are we exactly?
We're on section 8 or 7. 7 is the $5 million appropriation, also coming from ARPA.
Right.
And section 8 is on the international business attraction.
Okay, let's go to that.
So the Agency of Commerce Community Development proposed to us the creation of a representative in Canada, working with an agent to promote Vermont to companies that are in Canada that are looking for a U.S. foothold, and to work with them to bring them to Vermont. And so they're asking for $300,000, which covers a 2-year project. If you recall, the Lake Champlain Chamber of Commerce used to have a person that was focused on international trade, spent a lot of time working between Canada and Vermont and trying to promote Vermont's interests into Quebec. That program no longer exists with Lake Champlain Chamber for a variety of reasons. But then so the department is looking at, or the agency, I should say, is looking at this particular effort as a way to take advantage of our largest trading partner and closest international market. So a couple of things. So what does that look like? So really working with a firm in Canada over 2 years. There's 4 different phases. One is to really look at doing an industry analysis, trying to identify those prospects that would fit best within Vermont. You know, who has that need to come into the States, and also working in close collaboration to figure out who in Vermont would be a good host for that. I mean, Franklin County Industrial Development Corporation has done a great job of attracting and hosting companies coming down from Quebec, whether it's in the industrial parks or whether it's looking at other facilities. But there's a lot more. There's also a very active aerospace industry that the Vermont State Chamber of Commerce has often been participating in, trying to work more closely with the folks in Montreal and the folks in Connecticut and creating this aerospace corridor. I'm sure you've heard from Chris Corrigan sometime in the past, who is the state chamber's advocate for that. So that's one particular part. The second is really looking at generating specific leads. So the agency has created a metric saying we need at least 50 pre-qualified company prospect meetings in the 2 years. So this is a whole sales process. How do you develop the market? How do you engage in those sales activities? And then how do you get those people to move here? The third is really looking at trade advisory services, looking at making sure that companies have those trade opportunities and export readiness. And the last is a digital marketing campaign. So they would be doing marketing within Canada to try to promote Vermont as a place for companies to relocate. So that's really the emphasis here is $300,000 to support that 2-year effort of having that foreign trade representative in Quebec.
And was that the amount that was recommended by the administration?
It was.
And on the $5 million on
Better Places?
Better Places, was that the amount recommended by the administration?
It was. When it was originally proposed to us, that $5 million was coming out of the general fund.
And why is this coming out of the general fund, the 300,000?
Just a minute, please. I think it was in the analysis, the nexus to COVID. You can't really tie this to COVID, and the ARPA funds have to have a nexus to COVID.
Right.
And wouldn't this likely be base funding? And we're not going to close the office in 2 years, are we?
2-year experiment. Yeah, 2-year experiment. So it's if it doesn't work after 2 years, then nope, not going to do it again. But if it is successful, then sure. But you make a good point. When are you going to see results? It's not going to be in 6 months. It's not going to be in 7 months. So if this is approved, then the agency is going to put together an RFP, float that out to various trade representatives or potential trade representatives in Canada. The most likely host for this is somewhere in Montreal, but that doesn't have to be in Montreal. It could be in Drummondville. So you have to look at where that would be, and that's up to the agency to kind of figure out.
And just on
Ask,
the,
isn't this a piece of what Tim Tierney's job is at the moment at ACCD? Isn't he our sort of international business development?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's specialist, I think is in Tim's title. So this does fall underneath that, but and he could be the person that helps coordinate the agency's response to leads that get generated. But in generating those leads and bringing them to the agency, that is not happening right now.
Got it.
So that's what this is meant to do, is meant to really generate those leads for companies that want to relocate. And the agency would have to work very closely with the regional development corporations to figure out where's the right space for this company, what are the resources they need, what kind of infrastructure do they need. So there's a large dance that happens after you first see your potential dance partner.
Right. And I also see this as a proactive effort rather than a reactive one, which is where we've sort of been for the last couple of years, responding to requests to us rather than actively going out and promoting these partnerships and engagements. I hope that we will fully use the international piece after 2 years. So Canada is great. It's our biggest trading partner, but international also implies that we might have other countries and companies that would be interested in having a toehold here.
There have been various efforts by the state in the past. Do you remember when the chamber had an office? Was it Taiwan?
Yeah.
Or was it? And So there have been many efforts in the past with some success and hard to measure. But this is a good faith effort to stay close to home and really leverage that.
Yeah, right.
A couple of questions, Representative Kimball. Just going back to the technology-based economic development program, the $1 million in the breakdown, is that as the administration proposed?
It is. The administration proposed that the administration would be managing the technical assistance and also the grants. That was what the administration was looking for in this iteration of the bill. That would fall to the University of Vermont to do. Yeah.
So one thing I noticed, I guess we have a slightly different paradigm in the Senate. None of our budget items make it through the Appropriations Committee without having the money be removed and put it in the big bill. But when this is presented on when the House presents its budget on the floor, is there reference to that there are other appropriations and other bills that are coming forward? Is that how it's done?
Yes.
Okay.
So for instance, we did not include in this bill originally when we proposed it, the $5 million for the Better Places program. Realizing that it was an amendment on the floor to actually add that into this, even though it was in the governor's original request. So you're right, it's a different paradigm. So the money's still in the bill.
Okay. And
We envy you.
we're going to try and plow through the rest of this before we take a break. I think we can do that. What I'm not seeing here, maybe I'm missing it or maybe it's coming later. We had a lot of discussion last year and in the summer and in the fall about the seed capital fund.
That's at the end. Yep.
Yeah,
It is in here? Okay.
Yep.
it's coming up.
Yep.
Let's keep going if we can.
Okay. So we're past the $300,000. So now we're in workforce development and education. Section 10. Even it's odd, but following our just very recent discussion, we stripped the money out of this part and it's in the appropriations bill. So just to be totally inconsistent, this is workforce development and education. This is a large investment in the Vermont State College system as a way to provide education for Vermonters. There's a number of different programs that are created that are fully described in the appropriations bill. But you'll see in the description that creates all of the compelling arguments for why the Vermont State College system is in the position where they need to have both some support, but also they can provide some of this workforce training to people that are in the field. If you remember, the one thing that we did last year was we put $2.3 million into the Vermont State Colleges to set up a system where they could train people that were displaced from work and upskill so that they, while they were unemployed, would have a better skill set. That program after 3 days was fully subscribed, so they had to shut it down. They had over 900, almost 1,000 people that are registered for it. The success of that was it also provided some wraparound activities to support those people when they're taking classes. So that was very successful. That encouraged us to look to the Vermont State College system for coming out of COVID in this way. So there are a number of different scholarship programs that are not fully described in here. This is just the enabling language. The description of those programs you will find in another bill, in the appropriations bill.
Okay, so we should focus on page 18 in terms of the purpose, but the amounts and the uses, the specific uses of the fund are in the big bill.
They are, and it's $20,500,000.
Thank you.
And it's
Does it
just
all
a-
go to the state colleges or is it spread around different places?
spread around. So it's really, it's pretty amazing, actually. For instance, there's a Welcome Home scholarship program, which is devised to people that have been attending college out of state, and that if they return to full-time school at at one of the state colleges, then it provides them with a grant to pay for part of their tuition. There's also one that is devised to bring people back to school who have been out of school for more than 2 years, so that they can then receive some assistance. As you know, it's hardest for people who have been out of school for a while to then go back to school because their life gets in the way, whether it's relationships, children, jobs, and other things. There's also a program to provide scholarships for folks in the most needed professions. Practical nursing is one particular part. I think it's $3 million in that particular bill, as well as advanced mental health counselors and other professionals that we have a significant shortage. One is another form of nursing. So it's really a well-crafted, I think, program. It was presented to us by the Appropriations Committee after engaging the state colleges to say, help us help you. How can you provide us with workforce development programs at your facilities that we can embrace? And so there is, it is good for the workforce development. It's also good for the state colleges in this system.
So just for the purposes of our workload, how would you frame or describe who took the lead on this section, the Appropriations Committee, or did your committee do all the workup and make suggestions to them, or did they give you some suggestions for you to review?
I'd say it was the genesis of the idea of leveraging the state colleges in this way was the outgrowth of discussions of a group of representatives that were focused on how can we really focus on workforce development and also work with the state colleges. So it was didn't come out of a single committee that way. The lead on this particular idea was in the Appropriations Committee. So he brought to us some of and that person was negotiating, I wouldn't say negotiating, but working directly with the state colleges as to what things can you provide us. And so when that came through, it was then a collaboration between our committee and the Appropriations Committee. So
Who was that person?
that's Peter Fagan and the Appropriations Committee. Yep.
Thanks.
And Peter's done a tremendous job working with both the chancellor and the presidents of the different state colleges around the different programs that they can stand up and bring to us. The other piece of this is and where we hope as a committee to be focused, and we've already started to schedule testimony, is on how does this all work within the total workforce development structure. We did great work 2 years ago together between the House and the Senate on our workforce development bill that took us, I think, all session. Many of those ideas are still dormant, and we need to see them picked up. This is certainly part of it, but it's not all of it. So we think it's a good element.
Yeah. One piece of that are those pilots that are over in, I believe, the pilots on the funding between high school and CTE centers, and that's in education, I believe. But that was an important piece. That was one of our barrier challenges. And
yeah, we're waiting for the report from the Agency of Education. We're told it's coming soon.
Yeah.
About how those pilots went. Yep.
So Representative Kimball, I'm mindful of the time and the need for a break here. You're looking ahead to the rest of the bill. How much more time would you think you would need?
Probably 15 minutes.
Okay, let's go. Section 11.
Section
Micro business.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Yes.
Embrace.
Micro Business Development Program. I'm sure you're very familiar with this. So last year they stood up $2.1 million in grants that were given to micro businesses, those that have 5 or fewer employees when you include the owner in that business. There are some great success stories in this program. This is the community action agencies that operate throughout the state. And they added 5 business counselors quickly, and then administered a program to existing businesses and provided grants of $2,500 to $5,000, 436 different companies or individuals or businesses, proprietors were able to take advantage of that and really help them survive. This is stepping back into that with 2 different things. One is adding to their base appropriation of $200,000 to support their ongoing work. They've long been under-resourced in the kind of technical support and close support they give to individuals around starting a new business. And the other is $2 million that is in grants, again, to provide those businesses with help. One thing that we just added to our H315 that we'll be presenting back to you is to try to make it possible to also provide those grants to individuals that are starting a business because of COVID, because they were displaced from work. Either they're furloughed, maybe they're laid off or fired, or reduced hours, or working in a distressed industry. So we might send some language to you to say some of those grant monies can be used for individuals to start a business because of COVID, which we often see happening. You know, somebody's unemployed and they decide they got to do something on the side. A recent person in South Burlington said they just got released from work and they want to start a food truck. So that's it could be a great success, but there's some great success stories within the Embrace program and what they've been able to do. And we've long supported their activities as being real economic development. Grants are limited to individuals that are below or equal to 80% of the area median income. And so it's really a path out of poverty for many of the individuals involved here.
Yep.
So a question I have, did you take any testimony in coming up with this number that, for instance, we know like on the downtown tax credits, there was a lot more demand than there was money and we raised the appropriation. Was there this kind of demand for these kinds of grants at the Community Action Agency?
Yeah, so we did take testimony directly from the community action agencies and their association. And we heard from some of the counselors that are working directly with businesses. And I mean, they're great stories that they tell, very compelling. And so they ran out of money. They were originally granted $1 million, and then in their first round of funding last summer, and then in the fall, we added another $1 million. They went through that money, and they do believe that they have capacity to both grant the money and also the demand for it.
Yep. And this has been a program, as you know, that both committees have heartily supported. It accomplishes so many things in one major support effort, and I think building on their success is great. And I look forward to hearing some of the stories you heard. We all remember the switchback story.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, let's go on to BIPOC.
Yes, BIPOC, we took a lot of testimony from various business operators and also associations that really shared with us their frustration of not having either access to traditional business services and technical support, or just not really having equal access to many different facets of either grant programs, other things. And it was compelling information. And what we want to do, and we've gone through a few different iterations, is this. There's a lot of introductory language which gets to what the proposal is. The proposal is to provide funding to the Agency of Commerce Community Development, working with the Executive Director for Racial Equity in the state, to award a contract to an organization or an individual to convene the various stakeholders in the BIPOC community. And from that process is to create an organization that can represent the needs of that particular business community in the state and be an advocate. What we found with administering even the $5 million that we had in minority women-owned businesses is that it was the women-owned businesses, it was very easy to contact. They had an organization already set up, the Center for Women Enterprises as one. There are also counselors for the Vermont Small Business Development Center. But it was harder to locate and identify the businesses that would identify as BIPOC. There was no organization that was easy to tap representing them. It's not to say that it is a uniform group of businesses. It's not. It's a diverse group of businesses, as are the women-owned businesses. But we felt like it was important to try to stand up another organization that could then be a source of information and advocacy for that particular group, but also act as a way to provide information back to those participating businesses. So that's what we're looking for here, is to provide funds to create that organization. We spent a lot of time of discussing whether or not, or how prescriptive we should be. It should be a business network. It should be essentially a separate chamber of commerce. We decided it was not up to us. We really wanted the community of organizations that are currently involved to come up with what that organization looked like. We heard from many, many different organizations, and I don't want to forget anybody, but whether it was, hang on, it was fascinating to hear such a diverse range of opinions as to who is doing the right thing, who is doing the wrong thing, and we wouldn't expect anything less within a diverse group, and thanked everybody for their testimony. So Curtis Reed was the first person we talked to on this subject, and Curtis is with the Brattleboro organization, or Brattleboro-based organization. Is it Justice for Fairness? I'll get the name wrong.
It's partnership. It's the Partnership for Fairness in.
Yep. I've got my notes somewhere. Oh, there it is. Yeah. And also
any questions or comments on section 12?
So that was an appropriation of 100,000
yes.
ARPA money. Yes.
Yep.
All right, let's go on to the seed capital fund.
Yes, this is VCET, Vermont Center for Enterprise Technologies, is a general managing partner for the Seed Capital Fund. The original amount of money is $5.1 million have been invested in 23 different companies. 10 of those companies have not succeeded. They have failed, but they've also leveraged $183 million in other capital. So this is an important part of the total continuum of research, of and commercializing research, and then getting it into the marketplace and high growth companies. Vermont started this in 2010. It has been a successful venture, successful meaning there are many companies and many people employed in the industries that have been created. A lot of examples of, again, some names you'd recognize, some you wouldn't. No guarantee when you get into this type of industry as to the success, but this is managed by Vermont Center for Emerging Technologies. We took testimony and received many supporting letters from people that have been serviced by the Seed Capital Fund. So this is putting another $900,000 into the Seed Capital Fund. And remember that the $5 million originally was funds that were coming from ERA funds and also some money from HUD. So it's both VITA put money into it, as did VCET, taking that money from a grant coming from HUD.
How much is in there now?
So that it's totally invested. So that $5.1 million has been invested. There is a cash balance of about $350,000 or more. And that is to cover at least, I'm not sure if it's 1 year of operating expenses, because the fund has, the manager has obligations to be able to service the different investments that they have on behalf of the other investors as well. So it's not, they don't have money to invest, and they actually passed up investment opportunities last year because they didn't have capital. They're waiting for some capital to come back to them. The money is evergreen. The fund is evergreen, meaning they've invested the money. It's not a revolving loan fund. It's an investment in a company, and they get that money back when the stock that they own is either sold and they get the money back from that, or if it was in the form of a subordinated debt or a debenture of some kind, then that money is repaid. So that's how they get more capital right now in order to invest in new companies.
Have they gotten any money back?
Yes, they have over time. They've received money back and have reinvested. So I think the average investment for the companies is $180,000, both between the initial investment and also subsequent investments. So they have had the opportunity at times to make an investment in a first round of financing and also a second round. But the big success here is the amount of money that they're able to leverage and support these businesses come up. So that's where the $183 million in additional outside capital. They work with a lot of syndicated partners, folks that are investing in particular industries, or people that are based in Vermont investing in other industries. So it's yep.
So before we take a break and let you go, I have a sort of a global question here. We may be in a slightly better position than the House to look at other possibilities for economic development with all this new federal funds. I assume you didn't really, a lot of these ideas, similar to what we've been doing, are retreads from last year that didn't make it through and proposals from the administration, but the administration's proposal also didn't have the benefit of the March 13th Second Stimulus Act. Have you talked in your committee about other potential ideas with all this new federal money coming our way for economic development?
We didn't start with the money. So I'd have to say no in direct response to that. So we looked at the H360, which is now in the Senate, as perhaps the best investment in economic development with extending broadband across the state. And there's also an investment in childcare that we also supported, H171, and looking at what other things could we be doing in infrastructure or supports to really encourage economic growth. So that's where we were on those things. We want to spend the next few weeks, some of the time, looking at workforce development as an element of economic development, which we haven't had the time to do so far. In part, the monies to the Vermont State College system answer some of that, but not all of it. So we really want to focus on that. So it's, we didn't start with the money. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's hard because you didn't have the money when you were discussing
Well,
it.
and we're still not fully clear on all the money. So
Right, right.
that-
But I think the point of the question is that I think we want to, at least I know I personally want to be involved in some of the decisions of the American Rescue Plan money for economic development. And, generally those proposals start with the administration, but I don't think we fully have heard what's being thought of. Are they going to say, replicate the economic recovery grants and put another few $100 million into that? Or are they going to say, we've done enough? But, we're in a slightly different position timing wise, where we might have a better opportunity to look at that now. Maybe not, maybe we'll adjourn before we have a real opportunity to look at that. And, God forbid, but I mean, not God forbid, I shouldn't say that, but I mean, a lot of the Senate anyhow, both on the Joint Fiscal Committee and in the rest of the legislature, felt that a lot of policy decisions were made by the Joint Fiscal Committee as opposed to the policy committees.
Right.
And it wasn't for a lack of trying to do more in the other way. It's just a matter of timing and the summer and COVID. And so just want to make that point and keep that in mind. Senator Rahm.
All
We're gonna
right.
take a break after this question. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, so I was just, I mean, I wasn't ready to sort of ask a question after the BIPOC section because I was kind of looking through the next section on seed capital as well. And I think, you know, one of my big takeaways that could change in the findings in terms of the BIPOC.
Just muted yourself. There you go.
Not done that before. I feel like it's go hard. So the findings talk a lot about historic inaccess. But we know that even in real time, in the monies that have been distributed nationally and in the state, BIPOC businesses have been at the end of the line. I mean, there's report after report, study after study that shows that BIPOC businesses and women-owned businesses just were not in the queue in the same way to get access to a lot of first come, first serve resources. So, you know, I get studying it and having a new entity that helps make sure they have the embedded social capital and communications and support to be further in the front of the line in the future. But I don't see in all the monies that are proposed any sort of set aside to say this is currently happening and we should make sure that BIPOC businesses and possibly women-owned businesses, you know, have access in real time to a different pot of money. Did you all?
Well,
I mean, we had the set asides last year, so.
we did, and some of it was administered well, some of it wasn't. I think the agency did as good as they could have done, as well as they could have done, given the lack of data that they had. So we have not, as a state, done a good job of collecting data. You'll see that in part of the BIPOC section.
Yes, if I could say also, I added OPR to that section, as Senator Clarkson knows. You know, OPR also captures a lot of sole proprietors and entrepreneurs. So I don't think we should leave OPR out of data collection.
And quite honestly, our community action agencies who have been doing a huge amount of this work already just by virtue of the community they serve. So they are key partners on this BIPOC effort also.
Well, we named the Secretary of State in the bill, especially as we move forth on the business portal, that where people are registering their business, so that we can start to capture that data.
Yeah.
We did talk to the Secretary of State's office as to whether or not they have that's already dialed in for that, as to trying to collect that data going forward, and that'll be launched sometime next year. The other thing is that the agency did a good job of capturing data on who was applying, but so that we do have that data for the grants based on who applied and who received funds. So we do have that, and that is very helpful. And the research or the report that they provided both in August and also just recently about the second round of grants does break it down by county, by gender, by race, and what we don't have is a base to compare that to. Is okay, 18% of the funds and 34% of the receiving organizations were female-owned or minority or women-owned. What we don't have is how does that compare to the general population of businesses that are female-owned, or and so that information doesn't necessarily exist, and the same is true for BIPOC.
I thought we did know that. I mean, I know Change the Story has said, for example, you know, women identify as a third of business. So of the people who identify as a business owner, entrepreneur, women make up a third, which is higher than the national average, but they make up 10% of the revenues. So I feel like Change the Story does have some information on women-owned businesses. I believe 7% of new Americans, people who are limited English proficient or have another national origin, identify as entrepreneurs, and they're only 2% of who receives capital. So actually, Karen Cross and I did some of that research just to see how undercapitalized women-owned and minority-owned businesses were. So it might be interesting to talk to Karen Cross more about that. But We do have some of that data just from sort of census and national small business information.
Right, but you'll remember the Change the Story hit a bunch of barriers on getting that data also. They were very frustrated at what they were able to do and not able to do as a result of not having data by gender.
Oh yeah, I don't want to get in the way of better data collection, but I do
I
think
know that.
we know some of this information now.
Well, I think it's helpful. I don't know if you've had the agency present the results of the grants and how it breaks down by geography, by gender, by
No.
business type, all that kind of stuff.
We need that. That's a good reminder.
Yeah, and that was very encouraging, both from their August report and also, even though they weren't required to by statute, their February report. I believe it's February 11th when they issued it. And that does give a great breakdown of that. So if you compare it to those numbers centered around that you just provided, it tracks well with that. I mean, in terms of percentage matching for what you just said for women-owned businesses.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Representative
Representative
Kimball,
Kimball,
that was terrific.
thank you very much. That was terrific. Very good summary. And David Hall will owe you a debt of gratitude because I'm not going to ask him to go through the bill after that presentation. And we will be in touch. Committee, thank you again. We're going to take a 15-minute break. We're sort of right on schedule. We're going to pick up with David Hall on the other bill, H 150